5 years ago, I invested $10,000 in my e-commerce business, and unfortunately, it failed. But looking back, losing that money was one of the most important stepping stones of my career. I'm not sharing this story to scare you. I'm sharing this to give you the guidance that I wish I had received when I was just starting out. Hi, this is Mitch. I am a branding and storytelling expert, and I help entrepreneurs to monetize their talents online. I now run a successful business that I love, but as you're about to see, the 10,000 failure was a tuition I had to pay to get here. So let's be honest, most of us, we start our businesses because someone like Kylie Jenner or Hailey Bieber make it look so effortless. Look at how amazingly they package their products, the amazing photo shoots that they have, and it really inspires us, and we think that, oh wow, that looks effortless and let me try to do the same. But what we don't realize that those big celebrities, they have huge teams behind that could take care of marketing, the fun part of your business, but can also take care of the product, the not so fun part of the business, at least how it was for me. I remember back in the days when I was running my business, I really enjoyed more the fun part of the business, meaning that I really enjoyed creating the social media content, I really enjoyed shooting, I really enjoyed being the model of my product. I realized that doing it all on your own is super hard, especially if you are not an expert of that product. And to be honest with you, I was not really a jewelry expert. The reason I started it was just because I was really passionate about entrepreneurship, and I really wanted to start it off my own. And the first fun thing that I thought back then was doing a jewelry. And as you can see that when you don't have a passion in jewelry, you can't really innovate. You can't really just go and be like, okay, I have a feeling since I'm an expert on the product, if I design it this way, and again, if I could design it myself, then I'd be like, this is what's gonna be something that the market is gonna respond positively. The next thing I want to warn you about is that buying a stock is not a guarantee that all of it is going to be sold out. That's one of the other mistakes that I did. I remember back then I chose around 20 different jewelry variations, and I thought, okay, I like this design. But the reality was that out of all those 20 products, only 2 of them were something that the market wanted. It was the type of an engagement ring that was in 2 different colors, was in green and also was in white. And another one, it was like a moon type of a necklace. Having invested my own money and then realizing that, oh shit, I cannot sell these because they don't really respond well. And I think it was really bringing this anxiety in me. And I was like, okay, how do I find a way to make them sell? Because, okay, now I've invested money and I have to make sure that there's a return on investment. One of the other things that you have to realize is when you start a business, you have to make sure that you're an expert of this product. And as I told you, I was not really an expert of the jewelry. And I have my mentees who are the e-commerce founders who come to me and they tell me that they really want to learn all about branding and how to make their product stand out. But I can see that they are the expert of the product. They could be either the scientists who really worked hard and formulated this drink because they think that this is the drink everybody needs, and they know because they're the expert of their craft, right? In that sense is formulating the drink, and then they know that it's going to be healthy for the people who need it. Or it could be someone who used to be an ex-scientist, again, as ex-engineer who formulated some type of tincture that women can use for their hair. So here, when I see the clients or mentees that coming to me and they're saying that I am running an e-commerce business or I've just launched, I know that this is where I could help them because my strength is on the branding and because their strength is on the product. I really feel that sooner or later that is gonna work out for them because again, they are the expert of their product. The next mistake I remember I did back then was thinking that running paid ads would be my lottery, would be my escape to landing so many sales. And I remember back then, it was around 2021, e-commerce was booming, everybody really was talking about drop shipping, and meta ads worked really well. And when I was running ads, which was really sucking my budget, and at the same time, out of all the other products, only 2 were performing, and I realized that, oh wow, only 2 performing, but I don't have enough stock for only these 2. So it means I need to now invest even more money into these 2 products that are winning, and on top of that I have to come up with new designs that would still work. And again, because I was not an expert, I was like, but what is gonna perform? And it was really hard for me to find a way to sell and to scale this business. And I remember there was one point when I was like, okay, I need a business coach because there's something I do not understand. It's my first time in e-commerce and I really need a help from someone who understands e-commerce, who understands the market. And when I hired this business coach, and I remember she was telling me a lot about how I need to develop my branding, and which I was doing on the side, right? But again, it wasn't something that I was fully immersing myself, because there was this type of a pressure of, okay, but I have to make sales, but I've invested so much money. So branding wasn't something that I was really willing to put my entire head into it. And I remember she was saying that, you know what, and that the other thing you have to do is, because you're such a small brand, you have to go to those trade shows, those kind of a Sunday markets where small businesses bring either their food that they're selling, their candles, and then their jewelry. And she was like, you have to go to this kind of a Sunday markets where you can stand and sell your products. And I remember the moment she said it, Sunday market, I was like, I immediately cringed out, and I was like, no, I do not see myself doing this. And now that I'm thinking about it, back then, I was like, why was I cringing out? Because I know myself. I have my areas in midheaven. I'm like, I can do things that no other person could do. I have been on stages where I have stumbled, but I was like, I'm gonna do it because I know it's good for me. And I know that 10,000 people are watching me, but I'm gonna do it. And I have this drive to always try new things and go out of my comfort zone. And I would really do it. But then here I was like, is there any other way? Because I really don't feel comfortable. And now, right now that I'm more aware of what I want and who I am, I just realized that I was just not passionate about it. You know, at the moment, I'm mentoring for free at one of the NGOs which supports beginner entrepreneurs. And I'm mentoring there. So many people wondering, and they're asking me, they're like, Mitch, why are you doing this? First of all, it's for free. Second of all, it's taking so much of your time. Third of all, it's so much of your energy. And fourth of all, you have to put all your energy into your current business. What are you doing? What's in it for you? And honestly, I have nothing to tell them, because I'm like, I just enjoy doing this. And I know that it takes a lot of my energy. I know that it takes a lot of my time, but I just so damn passionate about mentoring new entrepreneurs and telling them all about their branding and how they have to strategize their personal brands, how they have to have an amazing storytelling campaigns. And even though for some people that's humiliating, that's a waste of their time, for me, it's not, because I'm like, I don't care what you're saying. I don't care if you're mocking me. I'm gonna do it, and sooner or later it might or it might not lead me somewhere, but at least I know that I'm doing something that my heart feels called to. Whereas back then, talking about the Sunday markets, I was like immediately cringed out. I was like, I'm not gonna do it. I would be those people that would be like walking and be like, really? And that's really unlike me again, because I'm such a brave person. That was a sign for me that this kind of a business is really not part of my identity, is really not my purpose, and I have to admit it sooner or later. Another thing I remember back then is that I wanted to stay behind the scenes so badly. And again, as a person myself, I have a YouTube channel. I used to be always in front of the camera. I was in front of the camera since my childhood. I love being in front of camera. I love speaking. Whereas for this business, I cringed out to be in front of the camera, to advertise. And even though I would do it because I was like, I need to do it. At the moment, for example, I'm running a personal branding agency and I work with a lot of clients. I can see who is truly passionate about their businesses and who are not. People who are really passionate about their businesses, they're like, yeah, it, let's do it. They will be like, okay, let me put in front of my camera. I'm going to advocate. I'm going to be vouching for my product. I'm going to be going on stages. I'm going to be like talking about it. Whereas when you're low-key not passionate about it and you're low-key doing it as, oh, okay, it's a profitable business these days, let's just do it. You will not put yourself in front of the camera. Why? Because putting yourself in front of the camera is an extra effort. Having to vouch for your product is an extra effort. And naturally, when you do something that you're not passionate about, you would always want to find some smart shortcuts where you don't have to do so much, but at the same time you want to cash in. And I don't think that a true entrepreneur with a long-term mindset have to have. And again, I have seen so many people who became rich too quickly, and I can see that they're just running the business that they're not passionate about, and every day they wake up and they tell themselves, what am I even doing? You might have this ADHD and the urge to start something so fast, but then the cost that you pay for that is waking up one day and realizing that, what am I even doing? You get everything on paper, your business is running, you have a lot of money on your bank account, but then you think to yourself, but is this something meaningful? Am I really passionate about it? Another mistake that I did was that I was emotionally attached to the idea of making it work. I read this book that talks about sunk cost fallacy. It's basically the phenomenon that people go through the moment they have invested something, either too much money, too much effort, and they think that, oh, because I have invested so much money, I have to make it work because there's no way out. I've already invested. But in reality, you're not rationalizing and you're not understanding that, yes, you have invested a lot already, and by continuing to make it work, you're gonna invest even more, and you're gonna be in this rabbit hole of keeping investing and you will never be able to quit. So why don't you just quit now before making even more investments and putting yourself through even more anxiety? And I remember that was the case for me as well. I was like, no, I have to make it work. But at some point you have to just think to yourself and be like, you know what? I have done everything that I was supposed to do. I've tried this effort. I've tried this effort. I work with a business coach. I've run ads. I tried to put it in different shops and the results are just not the same. Turns out I'm low-key not passionate about it. So let's just stop it and try to understand what is it that we're really passionate about. The next thing I remember I did, I will never forget about it, how I invested so much money in the professional photo shoot. I remember I hired a photographer, which was really expensive. And because we have these standards, we're looking up to someone like Kylie Jenner and Hailey Bieber, and you see these very well shot product images and you feel like, okay, I have to reach this level. And I've invested a lot of money. It was like a high level photo shoot into this without testing whether these products are sellable, whether the market responds to it. A lot of girls that I'm working with right now who are running their e-commerce businesses, the way they started their businesses, they started very humble. They started very small. They didn't do those fancy photo shoots. The things that they did, they learned how to take photos themselves. They used their iPhone camera. They were just shooting these products. You can create those beautiful images yourself and again, see which product is better responded by the market. And I remember, yes, at the end of the day, I would be creating it myself, but again, it felt so heavy. Again, everything that I'm doing in my current business right now feels more out of peace and out of tranquility. It doesn't come off as heavy, whereas back then, me having to do everything myself, having to be like, oh, let me be in front of the camera. Oh, let me record these products myself now because the professional photos are not helping anyways. And I remember it was coming through this, I really felt this huge resistance in my body as if it was something really pushing me back, but I was trying to push it forward. However, there's always a brightest side of every failure story. And I am so grateful that this experience had happened to me because it brought me closer to my true passion. It made me realize what is it that I'm truly passionate about. And this is the reason I'm running the business that I'm so obsessed about. I remember in the process of me running that brand, I really wanted to immerse myself in making the branding more interesting, in making the storytelling unique. Yes, there were times where I was like, oh, I have to focus on the product, but I really was always telling myself, gosh, I wish somebody had paid me. I wish somebody else was running my business, but somebody had paid me so that I could create killer storytelling strategies, killer campaigns, killer marketing. I really wanted someone just to pay me so that I can just do this portion of the work. This had made me realize that yes, my strength cannot be the product development and trying to understand which product works well in the market, but my strength was, if somebody else was a jewelry designer, my strength was that I could amplify that product. This journey had made me so much more entrepreneurial than any other venture would ever do. I remember I would always analyze other e-commerce businesses and I'll be like, oh wow, that's an interesting concept she's doing. Oh wow, this type of business, I never thought about it. And the more you are boiling in this environment of running something of your own and of trying to seek help here and there and trying to look for other businesses, you're learning, you're seeing what kind of businesses fail, what kind of businesses succeed, and it puts you in this entrepreneurial mindset. And this journey had made me such a sharper entrepreneur to the extent that even though I have some of the e-commerce clients that I'm helping them with their branding and storytelling strategies, I can always give them the advice about my own journey so that they do not spread themselves thin. Another epiphany that I had back then was this book that I had read about Sofia Amarvusa that was called Girl Boss. She talks about her success story of founding her e-commerce brand and how she used to run Nasty Girl back then. And I remember there was this one sentence that really stuck to me where she told that I really hated dealing with people. She was like, I was an introverted person and I really loved running the business, and the idea of me having my e-commerce brand is that I could always be behind the scenes. I do not have to see those people. I can just answer their inquiries whenever they send me their emails. I could always deal with the things behind the scenes, but I would never have to deal with them in person. Whereas in my case, when I was running this business, I was feeling so lonely, and the truth is, I do love dealing with people. Yes, people sometimes can be hard, people sometimes can be difficult, but I felt lonely in this journey. And yes, everybody says that entrepreneurial journey is very lonely, but the type of the business that I'm running right now, it's a service-based business. I never feel lonely. I get to talk with my clients, I get to talk to my mentees, and in that essence, I always feel like I'm surrounded. I always feel like I'm simulated. I always feel that my mind is simulated and some things are going on. And when I read this line and I remembered this line, I thought to myself, oh wow, okay, so, but then I'm running an e-commerce business that does not resonate with me because I really do want to be surrounded by people and something is just misaligned, but I cannot name it yet. And even though right now in my business, I do have difficult clients, I do have moments where people are just so hard to deal with and I start having my anxiety, but it's still something that I'm willing to tolerate, that I'm willing to go through, that I'm willing to work on, rather than just being behind the scenes, working incognito, never having to face anyone. I remember there was this moment when I had an order from a guy who was buying the engagement ring for his girlfriend. And I remember when I was helping him to answer the questions through the DMs and he was asking me, oh, whether this ring is good or not, and etc. I remember I thought to myself, oh my God, he's going to propose to her with my ring that's out of my collection. And I was thinking to myself, I wish I could see them. I wish I could ask them to record this moment so that I could use it for my own social media. I wish they could share their stories. I wish I could interview them and know how is it that they met each other, what's their story. And I wish I could be part of this campaign. I was having these kind of thoughts, and it was so sad that as an e-commerce founder, you don't get to interact with your customers. You just get to talk with them through the DMs. Whereas in the business that I'm running right now, which is more of a service-based business, I get to know what type of clients do I usually attract. I get to see what kind of dreams, aspirations, fears they have, and knowing more about them, it makes it more like a two-way street communication, and again, makes me feel so fulfilled in this journey. Another thing that had happened that made me realize that I would be better off with a service-based business is the way I was talking to customers through the DMs. They would ask questions like, is this jewelry going to survive if I go to shower with it? What is the right size for me? Can I trust your brand because it's still new? And they always had these objections, these worries. And man, I was so good at addressing their objections, and I was so good at convincing them, and I was doing it through the DMs. They never saw me in person, and I would try to assure them and reassure them that yes, it's a true brand. If you want, I can show you the behind the scenes and etc. And man, I was so good back then at convincing people behind the scenes on the DMs. They would transfer the money and I would ship the product, and I would tell to myself, oh my God, I wish I had the type of the product that was being sold for more money, something that could realistically pay my bills. And I was thinking to myself, talking through the DMs, it's great, it's cool, and I can see I could be a great saleswoman, but selling the product that max costs $50, $70, and trying to close it one by one through the DMs is not very sustainable and it's not very scalable for me. That means I will have to talk with thousands of customers to make it work. And I remember back then I thought to myself, I wish I was selling the solutions that costed more, something more than $1,000, so that if I talk with one person and I convince them through the DMs, the energy and the effort of doing this would worth it. Whereas in this case, it's like, it's not really worth it. At the moment in my business, I do talk with my clients through the DMs. I do handle their objections, and most of the time they are ready to book a discovery call with me. They invest in my solutions, and that made me realize that every journey that we go through shapes us for our next destined future. And I'm so happy that I had started this jewelry brand because, again, I learned how to handle objections, and back then they didn't even know me. And one of the most interesting parts that I still remember about these days with very cherished and nurturing moments, I remember I was just sitting in my room and telling myself, gosh, I wish I could grow this brand. And I really see the bigger vision of it is just being on stage and me having a community of women who just love wearing jewelry, who love being fashionable, but at the same time, they're really ambitious. And I just want to collect all of them. And I really had this epiphany. I really had this vision where I'm on stage and I'm organizing some sort of a networking gathering for all of them. And we're talking about dreams and aspirations. And I was really having this kind of a dreams, but I was like, oh, it's so sad. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon because my product is growing really slow. And the interesting part is the type of the business that I'm running right now, it is more realistic and more aligned with what I had envisioned back then. Because right now I do work with ambitious women who are entrepreneur, yes, who are fashionable too, but they're running their businesses and I am really there on stage, I am mentoring them. But here, yes, we're talking about dreams and ambitions, but we're talking about it in a practical way, as in what do we have to do to get there, as in what kind of storytelling strategy do we have to create for our personal brands? And all of this is happening, and it's crazy to me that most of the time we already have all our answers within. We already have our purpose within, but most of the time we don't really listen to it because we're distracted by the external circumstances. And most of the time the vision comes to us and goes, but we choose to ignore it. It's crazy that the day that I'm having the realization, I've always been a mentor. I've always been a speaker. I've always been a person who would lead others. And it's crazy that jewelry brand that failed made me realize that everything was working in my favor. It had made me such a sharp and strong entrepreneur that no success, no amount of success could have ever shaped me this way. And I saw one of the CEOs, he wrote a post on LinkedIn where he said that in your 20s, you have to embrace the failure. You have to start things, even though it's a crazy idea. You have to fail, you have to stumble, because your early 20s is the time that you have to fail, and you have to fail a lot. And you have to make sure that this becomes part of your journey, because yes, you will have your 30s to have your stability, to have everything in place, but 20s is the time where you fail and you do things that you'll be like, what the hell, why did I even do it? But that's the time for this. And I'm just so happy that exactly had happened to me as well. The moment I have e-commerce brands, and I exactly know how e-commerce brands work because I worked on this too, but only this time, yes, I get to be paid for only doing the marketing side of things. And what I want to say to everybody who is watching my video is that if you ever fail, don't ever take this personal, because back then I remember low-key I would take it personal. I would think that, well, maybe I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough. But sure as hell you're brave enough, and bravery will get you places. And even though your business is not going to succeed for the first time, it will always be a part of your journey, and it will always be a powerful story that will inspire others, and you will always be this catalyst who can prevent other entrepreneurs, other ambitious people to not make mistakes that you yourself made. And that is such a rewarding experience. Thank you so much, guys, for hanging with me here. It was really powerful to share my story of my failure, which is never truly a failure. So if you're an e-commerce enthusiast and you really want to get better at amplifying your product, I actually made this video for you so that you can learn more about the storytelling strategy behind the product-based business that helped my clients to go viral and to have more sales with their product.